with this traffic update from David.
You see, I just see Tokori Q, peas, rice, and cascado. You grab and galaloo, and never just give me not leaving. Not leaving. The neighbors string so deep and freedom the country. Where else the world you
Public procurement reform in Trinidad and Tobago has been a long time coming. While it's been a long, winding road going way back to its roots almost 60 years ago, when civil society, associations, and other groups began to advocate the need for proper procurement procedures. Since then, significant strides have been made. Come with me and let's take a walk down memory lane. In 1961, when times were simpler, with a smaller number of government organizations, the Central Tenders Board Act was established with sole responsibility for government procurement and disposal. As time progressed, the external environment changed, impacting the public service to the point where the CTB Act had to be amended several times, and statutory bodies and state enterprises were developed. In 2005, the White Paper on Procurement Reform identified several weaknesses and limitations with the Trinidad and Tobago procurement regime, including CTB Act limited to the tendering phase of the procurement cycle, parallel procurement systems, procurement bypassing of CTB, limited human resources hampering effective monitoring. Fast track to 2010, where a joint select committee was appointed to consider legislative proposals for public procurement reform. In 2015, the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act was assented to and partially proclaimed, leading to the establishment of the OPR. From 2015 to 2017, significant input from the UNDP led to drafting a handbook and special guidelines as well as training public officers. Enter in 2018. The Procurement Board was appointed by the President of the Republic of TNT, where they immediately set out to develop the regulations to support the Act through stakeholder engagement and consultations. Today, we are proud to be the pioneers of good governance in procurement, retention, and disposal of public property as we stand upon our core values: integrity, transparency, accountability, and value for money. We are committed to be a corrupt-free Trinidad and Tobago, as our vision to be the catalyst for transformation through best practice in procurement, retention, and disposal of public property is realized. This is effected through our operations according to Section 13 of the Act, with the aim of changing the trajectory of public procurement practices in our country so that we leave a lasting legacy for our future generation.
All right, welcome back. So at least 19 children died in a horrific school dormitory fire in Guyana, which has shocked the nation and led to its president to declare 3 days of national mourning. The fire that engulfed Mardia Secondary School's female dormitory killed 18 girls and a boy, according to Guyana's Department of Public Information, revising down its earlier death toll of 20. To tell us more is Guyana opposition leader Aubrey Norton. Mr. Norton, good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Norton, what's the mood in Guyana this morning? It must be an air, I suspect, of despair.
It's a mood of people being shocked, people being extremely sad, and people who believe that there should be a thorough investigation and we should get to the bottom of what has happened to these innocent children. If you know the environment, Region 8 is one of our hinterland regions in which villages are far apart. And so there was a dormitory in which the children coming from all across the regions would live in so that they can attend school. Because many of these villages are small in numbers. And therefore, if you have a school there, you might not have enough children. But once you bring all the children from the different communities to one point, the need for a dormitory emerged, and the dormitory was there. There are a number of questions that are being raised that I will deal with late in the program, but it is clear to everyone that there is some amount of negligence, and therefore, as if you were following what were happening, when the president arrived at Mahdia, there was protest and picket against him. And so the people are in the mood to ensure that they get answers and they get justice.
Mr. Norton, from what we heard from the authorities yesterday, is that the fire was maliciously set, which begs the question now, is it that does it tell a tale of lack of supervision at the dormitory? What does it say to you?
First of all, I would say that it is alleged that it is a child who did it. But it is more than the absence of supervision. That will be one element. First of all, I think one has to look at the building code and to what extent the Ministry of Public Works is ensuring that in construction that you adhere to the building code. Now you have a dormitory where children would live in, and the information is that it was ill-equipped to be able to deal with the fire, the absence of fire extinguishers, no alarm systems. And then it is compounded by the fact that you grill this entire building up, and there is no mechanism in the case of any form of disaster for the children to get out. And so to me, that constitutes gross negligence on the part of the authorities. I don't think any sensible person will grill up an entire building. More so, you have a padlock on it, which you have to find keys, etc. So it's a real serious issue. Then having had that, and people would have broken into the building, they use hammers and got through the wall, bring out the children. You were then saddled with the absence of health supplies in the region to deal with the injured. That again is a manifestation of not only negligence, but incompetence on the part of the Ministry of Health. In my opinion, there should be at least 3 resignations here: the Minister of Education, the Minister of Health, and the Minister of Public Works. It is the responsibility to protect our children was placed squarely at the feet of the government. This is a government-governed institution. And if there are no proper protocols, etc., then the tragedy that occurred was just waiting to happen. It is my sincere hope, as I express condolences to the family, to friends and relatives, that this will be a wake-up call and that we put the mechanisms in place to ensure that this never ever happens. And while the focus is on Mahdia, where the school is, it should also be remembered that the children are not from Mahdia, they are from surrounding communities. But it will impact Mahdia because geographically it is placed in Mahdia. And so there are a lot of issues to be dealt with here after the period of mourning.
But what about the response from the communities in which the children were from? What has the response been from those communities who
What
would
we
have
have
lost children?
what we have seen so far from social media, etc., is that the response has been to protest what has happened. They have made it clear that as far as they're concerned, they put trust in the government institution and put their children there. And then this happens. They have raised the question of compensation. The mood there is clearly one in which they felt that they were let down by the government, that the incompetence of the government caused them to lose 20 lives. And that, I think, is the point that should be made here.
And what about the government's response to this situation?
The government response has been one to mobilize the joint services, the aircraft, etc., to get persons out and to deal with the disaster itself. I would say that the government did respond in a reasonable way, but there should have been no need for such a response if we had put in place the necessary mechanisms and safeguards to ensure that something like that doesn't happen. And I know of at least one institution in Georgetown where children are held, is grilled in the same fashion at Sapphire. And here it is my sincere hope that the government takes immediate action and ensure that those institutions are safe. If one accepts that a community like Madhya, at a time when Guyana has oil resources, and we have been very critical of the government putting a lot of the resources into big infrastructure in terms of building buildings, etc. But what this suggests is that a critical area that needs to be beefed up is the fire service. When one thinks about it, a large community like Madhya has one fire tenant. That in itself is an indication that there isn't a focus on the safety and well-being of our people.
Mr. Norton, in your assessment, what do the relatives of the victims need?
What they need? First of all, they need reassurance that there'll be a proper investigation. Secondly, they need reassurance that those found to be responsible are dealt with by the law. And then they need to be reassured that moving forward, the environment for their children and all children in the country will be improved, and that you kind of obviate or remove the risk of this recurring. At the more individual level, because of the distance apart, etc., they will need the support of the government to get the bodies back to their communities. But I sense in this kind of environment where they were completely burnt, you will have to be able to have the capacity to identify who is who, so that the parents can obtain the remains of their children and be reassured that it is that of his or her child. And it was worrying because we saw, I think, the Prime Minister and others without any form of gear that is necessary on the site, which might have very well compromised the integrity of the crime scene. I think it should have been treated as a potential crime scene, and therefore no one should have been on the premises, etc., so that the process of investigating, etc., isn't affected by the presence of people who should not have been there. And so I think in general terms, what the parents would want, what the community would want is an open process in which there is investigation, there is accountability, and those found culpable dealt with in keeping in the law.
Mr. Norton, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has promised to assist Guyana in this respect. But to Guyanese nationals who are living in Trinidad and Tobago and who may be viewing this interview this morning, what role can they play in assisting Guyana through this difficult time?
Well, they can play a number of roles. They can be one of the voices of conscious, holding the government accountable. This issue should not be politicized. It should be dealt with in an objective manner, and they can play the role of ensuring that happens. Then they might have the expertise that is needed to do the kind of forensic work that is necessary. And in that regard, they can play a role. They can also provide support to the family, material and other forms of support. And there will be those who have skills in psychology and social work. There are a lot of persons who will need counseling at this stage. And in many regards where Guyanese in the diaspora can help, they should help. So I would think that there is a role for Guyanese in Trinidad and in the diaspora generally to ensure that this matter is handled as a disaster of national proportion. It is my sincere view that it should not be politicized, that we should get to the bottom of it. And in getting it to the bottom of it, it should be done in a way that the findings are acceptable by all the people of Guyana, including those in the diaspora.
Is there also a role for the opposition to play in this matter?
The opposition has been playing its role. If you know how Guyana is structured, we are opposition nationally. But in the region, in Madia, it is our political party that won the elections there. And so the mayor and deputy mayor there are from the APNU AFC. And they were involved in giving leadership, being on the ground, and ensuring they provide accurate information, ensure they engage families, etc. So the opposition began very early to be involved. In fact, my understanding is they were involved in mobilizing the people who actually went to help break into the place and get some of the people out in the best way they can. We know for now that they had to break a hole in the wall and people came out through there. As leader of the opposition, I'm heading in the area tomorrow. In fact, I'd hope that we could have been there from the minute we heard about it. But a lot of the aircrafts had to be utilized for evacuating people, etc. And we could not get a flight. The first flight we're getting in is tomorrow, and a team from the opposition will be on the ground from tomorrow.
What is your message to the people of Guyana in these difficult times?
The message to the people of Guyana must be, one, be very supportive of the families, friends, the relatives. Two, should be very responsive to the nature of this issue and be very modest in our pronouncement and our approach. But I will also say to the people of Guyana, we have to demand higher standards. We have to demand that our resources be used in a way that allows us to protect our children ensure their safety. And so, again, I will make the call for all Guyanese to hold those responsible accountable so that in the final analysis, we get to the bottom of the issue, and whatever results we come up with should be credible and acceptable to all Guyanese. This is a national disaster in some regard. It's horrific. It's a tragedy that we should do everything to ensure never ever repeats itself.
Just incidentally, Mr. Norton, how old is the dormitory?
I don't know that I can tell you the exact age of the dormitory, but I know it was built, I think, and I don't want to give incorrect information.
Yes.
But I think it was built within the last 15 years, somewhere around that. It's not an old dormitory in the sense of building.
Yeah, structure.
I think it is, yeah. What might be a question, and which is, that's why I say the Ministry of Works must play a role, Public Works must play a role. I think we need to have well-established standards for dormitories so that people are guaranteed that they are safe in this environment. And that is why I said the minister and the Ministry of Public Works should be held accountable when it comes to the building code and the building standards when it comes to these buildings. Because unfortunately, in Guyana, a lot of times the people that are chosen to do these contracts, etc., are not people qualified to do it.
Yeah. Mr. Aubrey Norton, Guyana opposition leader, thank you very much for speaking with us this morning, sir.
Thanks for having me, and you are welcome anytime to engage.
Thank you very much. Wish you all the best.
Thanks.
And all the Guyanese, we wish you all the best. All right. So we are going to a very short break. We do have these headlines for you.